Hey there, my name is David Wood, and welcome to My Extra Mile. Today's show, mind-blowing. I mean, this woman went from rock bottom, lost everything in rehab, and has built her life and constructed her life to become a multi-millionaire, and so happy and grounded. The show is called The Unlikely Millionaire, so enjoy it. Take notes and apply it, because it applies to every single person on the planet. You know what to do. Subscribe, share this with your friends, get involved with the conversation, and please push the like button. And we'll definitely see you on the other side. Enjoy the incredible Tracy O'Malley. Oh my goodness. Tracy, I just want to say, I'm so excited. You know, when I think about conversations, and you and I just talked for a couple of minutes, and you said something, you say, whenever we talk, you know, we just kind of roll into this beautiful, natural, easy conversation. But, you know, I love your story. I have heard it a number of times, but each time I hear it, I pick up new distinctions and new nuances of the story. And of course, the further you move through it, you know, as you look back with this wisdom that you've gained from it, you know, you articulate it, you know, in different ways, so it lands differently on different people. That's what I love about it. So I want to go back. You know, you're a professional network marketer. You're a multiple 6 or 7 now. Are you a 7-figure income? 7. So you're making over $1 million a year. I mean, let's let that settle in people's minds and hearts, right? But when we go back to just before your journey into network marketing, describe your life. And even if you've heard this story before, I want you to listen, because where we're going to go afterwards is going to be sort of unpacking this differently. So Tracy, take us back. What was going on?
Well, this time 8 years ago, I was about to get a phone call that changed everything. I was on the hamster wheel of life. I'm a single mom, have been for 13 years. I was in a corporate job that I had to go into after the recession and a divorce and all of that. I was great at it, a very high-powered executive job in a male-dominated industry where I did shine, and I hated every second of it. And, you know, I was the sole provider emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially for my 2 kids. And, you know, I was about 2 weeks away 8 years ago from getting a phone call from my dad that said, I'm dying, you need to come home right now. And in July, so 12 days after that phone call, my dad passed away. I had just turned 40. I was kind of looking at my life as like, I've got a lot of life to live, and is this as good as it's going to get? I was looking into the faces of a 14 and 15-year-old, knowing that they were repeating some of the things about myself that I didn't love very much.
You mean repeat it? You mean verbalizing?
Just like their
Or copying, mentoring, or modeling?
all of the above, like
Right.
the anxiety, the way that was manifesting in them, the way that they would cope. I have one that's an escapist and one that internalizes everything. And I'm kind of a hothead. So that was like brewing for both of them. And it was in that moment, like I had this, as much as I was beating myself up for all of this, because I knew I wanted something different for my life, but I wasn't modeled something different. You know, we do what we are modeled, taught, and told, no matter how much we want to change it. And it's kind of like one of those things, you have to wipe out the hard drive of everything you've ever known in order to change it. And if you don't repair it, you repeat it. And I was watching that actually happen.
Whoa. Because people need no. I mean, that's so good. And I think people need to hear that twice or 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
If you don't repair it, you repeat it. And
Yeah.
so many people are on that repeat cycle, you know, and it's such a fabulous thing, is that idea about the possibility to repair. Now, with all the science showing us, neuroplasticity shows us that we can completely repair any past conditioning, right?
100%. And, you know, I was 40 and I'm
You're not over 40. Don't even lie to us. Look at you.
I am almost 50 at this point.
Wow.
I am.
Bam.
Yes. And it's one of those things that, you know, I was like, okay, I'm Aries. I'm an Irish girl. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. Like I have all these things that make it very challenging for me to change my ways, so to speak. And yet I wanted something so different, not just for my life, but it's one thing to tell our kids do this differently than I did, but they're going to do exactly what we do.
Yeah.
And I knew the only way to change the legacy, and not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually, was to lead the way. And so at the age of 40, with a 14 and 15-year-old in tow, I completely overhauled my life, decided to let go of alcohol, food addiction, codependency addiction, anger issues, you name.
Well, and just to take us in there, I mean, you were an addict at that time, right?
Yeah, I was very high functioning. Most people would be like, especially in my family, they're like, "You're not that bad." I'm like,
You're Irish. You're not that bad. You're Irish.
I mean, I'm Irish. I came out of the womb knowing how to fight and drink. So, it's in my blood, but it's one of those things. It's like, well, I'm not that bad, but I'm seeing something repeat that I don't want for my kids because I know what is after that, and I don't want that for them. And so in order for them to not carry that, I have to show them a different way. And if that means letting go of every person in my life and everything that I hold as safe, then I will do that. So I stripped away my entire network of friends, most of my family. I took away my financial security when I walked into the boss's office and said, I can't stay here, and just operated on faith, grit, and believing that there was something much bigger for me and my kids and my legacy after them that was ahead of me. And that is scary for me, for somebody who's worn masks most of my life and, been this stoic, hard ass Irish bitch from Chicago. I mean, that's who I was. And I wiped all of that and said, this is me. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I'm scared. And I am learning new tools. And oh my gosh, my kids looked at me and they're like, thank God you're here. When I did that, because, it's one of those things, like being that stoic, like tough ass girl, like looking back at my childhood and at my kids, like we all have human emotions. We experience a wide range of them. And if we don't show our kids how to navigate them, they start to believe that something's wrong with them for feeling those things.
Yeah.
And it was when I showed up in all of my emotions and not burdening them with that, but like saying, I'm hurting. We're going to make it through this. I'm angry. We're going to make it through this. I'm happy. We're going to make it through this. And showing them what that looks like in real time changed everything within my home. And then when I entered network marketing 6 months later, I just integrated.
How many years ago was that?
8.
Wow. Have we
I know.
really known each other that long? We don't hang out. We don't hang out enough. You said something which I want people to sort of latch onto in their mind, is that, as your hard-assed Irish bitch, let's say, is that, to survive in the world we grow up in, we become and we start to model the world around us. And so that that stoic hard-ass bitch was really the way you survived and navigated the waters of your life. And a lot of people are out there right now listening, and they may have that label. And maybe we should talk about labels a little bit, because you had a number of labels, right? Addict, Irish, drunk, right? Whatever. But mother, friend, whatever. But, with that mask that you wore and that shield that you carried over your heart, it meant that some of the friendships you had weren't really authentic or real, right? Because we're projecting out. Is that what happened? Is that why you end up letting people go? Or?
Well, it's one of those things we attract into our lives, and we keep in our lives what allow us to maintain what we're doing. And quite honestly, I had friends in my life that were great people, but would enable my behaviors and would never, ever call me to the carpet. Because if you did, you're out.
Right.
Bye.
Right.
And most people knew that. And when I had this realization that tough exterior was something that really kept me safe as a little girl, I had to embody that as a little girl to stay safe. And when I recognized that as a grown-up, that isn't working anymore, instead of beating myself up for it like I used to, because I knew, like, I have the compassion and the heart. I'm probably the most sensitive person I know. But when I realized that was just this little girl who that's me at 4 years old. And I keep her really close because that's who's operating in fear a lot of the time. And when I realized that that was her just scared, the compassion for myself was huge. And when you can have compassion for yourself, you're able to freely, authentically give it to other people.
Mm.
And it's been a healing journey to recognize that. And it's really hard because, quite honestly, David, I am not close with any of my family anymore, my extended family. And it's heartbreaking. I love them all very dearly. And I realize we can love people and not be in relation with them anymore. Because when I stood up and said, this is who I am, this is where I come from, this is what I've learned, and I'm not going to do it this way anymore, they all took it very, very personally.
Personally, yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
And then there's a lot of fear because, as I went through that as well, you and I have very similar, the fear that you're going to expose them is part of that, right? You expose truth, and it's sort of, I noticed that with my mom, that, and luckily I was told something, when I went and confronted her, and didn't confront her in a negative way. I just wanted to stop the pain that I was feeling. I was just carrying around this anger and this hatred. I mean, I don't even like using that word anymore. But a very wise woman said to me, don't expect anything to change, and don't expect them to say sorry, and don't expect them to actually acknowledge what happened. And all those things happen. And because I knew it in advance, or I actually had that in my mind, I was like, oh my God, she's right, versus getting into the finger pointing and blaming and beating my chest, right? So very fascinating. You said something else I just want to go back on for a second. You talked about being run by the 4-year-old. It's such a profound, you and I could talk for a day on this. Well, I got just goosebumps even thinking about it all through my body, right? But a lot of people don't realize, that sort of early emotional incident can really dictate how we behave for the rest of our life. And that 4-year-old is running the ship, right? And so talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people don't grasp it quickly because they haven't done the work yet, or they are feeling maybe some of the things you were feeling, and not realizing that, somewhere in their life, something happened and they're still stuck in that moment behaving around that. Do you want to chat about that?
Yeah. And, I talk very openly about things about my life from my perspective and my experience, right? It doesn't mean, like, if my mom or anybody of my family is like, that's not how it happened, I'm like, well, this is my experience and my perspective. Most of my childhood, I didn't remember. I had blocked out a lot of it until I intentionally invited whatever awareness needed to come in to heal in. And that started really hardcore 8 years ago. And then I was just started to be flooded with all these memories of things, and how I related to women was based around the experience I had with my mom and the women of my family, and how I related to men makes a lot of sense why I was in male dominated industries and how I operated, not just with men, but especially romantic partners. And I had to really unpack where those beliefs came from. My experience with women early on, which is ironic because getting into network marketing is a woman
dominated 80% and 90%, right?
Like, if I had entered into this even a year earlier, this wouldn't have worked for me because I hadn't done work around women yet. But my experience with women was they wouldn't be there for you. They were weak and they would abandon you, because that was the experience with my mom. With men, the belief that this is probably something that all of you guys need to hear. I've experienced immense trauma in my life, emotional, physical, spiritual, sexual trauma in my life early on, but nothing held as much weight as one sentence I heard as a 4-year-old. This little girl heard about the day she was born. My dad was very Irish and Archie Bunker-like, and those of you over 40 know what that's like. Just no filter at all. And I remember as that age hearing the story about the day I was born. And it was a big joke. I was born in 1972. Back then, the men weren't allowed in the delivery room. That's how old I am. And my dad was chain smoking in the waiting room. And after 30-something hours of labor, the doctor comes out and tells my dad, "Congratulations, Mr. O'Malley, you have a daughter." And my dad put out his cigarette and he looked at the doctor and said, "You know what? You can keep her. I don't want her," because he wanted a boy. Totally joking. obviously. But as a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old little brain heard that and immediately bought into the belief that, oh my God, what is wrong with me? My dad didn't want me. And in that moment, I deciphered as a 4-year-old that I need to be as close to perfect as possible and to be whatever my dad wanted me to be in order to be worthy of love, acceptance, and attention. And so from that moment forward, especially where it came to men or like a boss or whatever, I became the chameleon. I could assess a situation and know exactly what it called for and could be that. And women, I just kind of kept all at arm's length. I didn't trust any of them anyway, but that was the most traumatic thing of my life, because that from that moment forward put me in the back seat. I didn't even know who I was till I was 40 years old.
Yeah.
Because I was just operating, what does the situation need me to be worthy of acceptance, love, approval, and attention? And like, if I could show you this picture, like if I zoomed out, like you see this green right here?
Yeah.
That is my dad.
Just if someone's listening on a podcast,
Oh yeah, sorry.
Tracy's holding up a photograph of her 4-year-old self, and it's so very typical of that age. You know, we're talking about early 70s. Can I hold it up again? I'll describe it to him. It's got a sort of a green background, and she's wearing a sort of a very colorful little dress, and you see that
pigtails and all the things.
Yeah, she's anyway. Carry on.
But the most important part of this picture, David, is look at the smile on my face, and
Yeah.
so cute. But if I zoomed out to what the picture actually is, it is my dad passed out drunk, and I am pretty much in the stance of like nothing to see here, and I'm smiling and protecting the scene, like masking this, like just ignore what's happening here because I got this. At 4 years old, that's kind of how I operated, and that's where that stoic, hard ass kind of over time, it really developed into that protective mechanism for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I have a very similar story, as you know, and there's so many similarities. It's actually uncanny.
Yeah.
And I chose humor, but I didn't trust women. And so, I mean, for years, even as a young adult, I'd let women in on my terms, because I could seduce them and I could flirt and whatever, but I wouldn't let them into my heart. And so I would always be like, just moving on. Right. So I could get them to fall in love with me to fill my cup, and then I'm out of there. Right. And that took me a long time to figure out that I didn't trust my mother. So I had a lot of distrust of women. And my father was like, I didn't see him from 7 to 15 anyway. But it's interesting as well, because I was told, when I was a young boy that I was, conceived in a drunken rape. Imagine that. So, I mean, you think of these messages that you carry, right? And that's why I'm saying there's so many similarities and I see that, where we stop and I was also the chameleon walking to Eddie and still are. I mean, you still have that capacity, but we do it from a different well now. It comes from a well of service. And I see even behind you, love, serve, care. Right. And I mean, that's where you come from. Whereas before it was done as a way of protection, and it was a way of manipulation sometimes. Right.
100%.
Getting what you want. Right. Yeah. Awesome. That's interesting. So you said, if we go back to, the moment you realized, and here we go. See, we thought we were going to talk about network marketing. We're not.
But this all plays into it, though.
Of course. But what I love is that this is so profound. But there's a moment that you started to become more aware, and what was the catalyst of you to do the work? What was the catalyst of you to really go inside and find yourself and go back to that place in time where you froze and sort of unlock your real heart and your real soul, let's say?
Mm-hmm. I will never forget it. It was 20 years ago, and my daughter was 4 at the time. And I believed that I grew up in Chicago, and when I met the guy that I was going to marry, which is a whole nother story, why I married him, and hightailed it all the way to Arizona, 2,000 plus miles away, I believed that I could outrun, outlive, outlearn, outwit my past and just set up shop in a new place and wipe it all clean. I thought that that's really how it was done, until my daughter turned 4 and I was looking into the eyes of a little girl that looked just like this picture, but she had a different spirit and she had a different sparkle in her eyes, and one that I didn't have. And I had resentment for her. And I was like, how the hell does she get this life and I didn't? Like that little brat in me, like that little girl that was like angry that she didn't get that, started to brew, and I couldn't quiet her. And I certainly did not want to take it out on my beautiful, innocent little girl who has a free spirit and is more like you. She uses humor and fun, and she's this free spirited angel in the world. And I knew, like, whoa, this is not about her. And so I walked into the doors of Al-Anon for the first time and read a book
Sorry,
called,
just want people to understand. Al-Anon is families of alcoholics. So
right.
as what's the other one, the main one?
There's AA, there's Al-Anon,
AA,
there's
Alan.
code. I mean, there's all sorts of different 12-step programs, but I had heard about Al-Anon, but I was like, whatever, I don't need that, right? Until, I was like, I need help to at least process this. And I remember being in that room and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. But all of a sudden I realized that there was a lot more work to do. So that was 20 years ago. I was 28 years old and I had a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I started to chip away at it a little bit, but I would take like 2 steps forward, 7 back. But because I didn't have an environment around me that would support it, and I was too proud and stoic to really let anybody in. And so that went on for another 12 years. And then it was 8 years ago that my dad died. And I think that my dad dying, as heartbreaking as it was, and he's all the hard parts about me and all the really good parts about me too. I'm not quite sure I could have really been open enough to do this work if he was still here on earth. And part of me is like, he left this world so I could really heal and move forward with it. So 8 years ago, when, I was in a relationship that was pretty much my father, I was behaving like my father. My kids were starting to behave like me. And it was like, okay, this 2 steps forward, 7 back isn't doing it anymore. Let's rip off the fucking Band-Aid and go all in and start from scratch and wipe out the hard drive. And that's kind of where it was. They were 14 and 15 then. And yeah.
It's, again, I can't believe. I mean, we've had these conversations,
I
but
know.
when I was 7, my dad left my mom for her best friend, and I remember I was asked by my mom to go down the stairs. We lived on a 3rd-story building, and I had to chase him. She said, "Make him stay, make him stay." And I'm a 7-year-old running behind him, asking him to stay, and he jumped in the car, slammed the door, and drove off. And I didn't see him for years and years and years and years and years after that, right? So, but it's interesting because when when my son was 7, my wife and I were separating, right? But this is when I started to do the work, because I could start to hear my father and my mother coming out of my mouth, and I could hear how I was talking. And that's why I got into a lot of people don't know why I started personal development. And it was really because I could see the lineage of pain being passed, the torch being passed to my own son, right? And it was just like, we're both going to be crying in a second, right?
I know. It's everything though.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, but it's interesting in that moment, that sort of catalyst, there's a moment in time. And of course, we're so lucky today, because if we go back to your father's time, there was no outlets. There wasn't personal development. There wasn't this kind of environment. There wasn't, so there was no model for him. Like my father and I are best friends now. I don't think of him like a dad so much. I think of myself as a parent, to be quite honest, but I feel that, luckily he's lived a long time. But I don't expect any fatherly things from him. But I do love him a lot, and I can see my character in him, and I can see where, now with this little gray beard, I kind of look like him a lot, right? But it's interesting, yeah. So talk to us. So you're at this moment in time, you're gone for help, but what was the navigation? Because you said something earlier about repair or repeat. And you were in the sort of trying to repair and then repeating, trying to repair and then repeating. But then you entered this environment, this network marketing environment. What role has this played in allowing you to truly embrace and truly repair the sort of that? I mean, we're talking about 42 years of your life, right? And you could argue 38, because up to a 4-year-old, right? There was that moment of 4 where you really sort of were emotionally wounded, let's say.
Yeah, I got into network marketing, ironically, the morning that I picked up my 6-month sobriety chip. So for 6 solid months, my everything was breakdown, repair, breakdown, repair, breakdown, repair, make amends, really lean into my kids. And, you know, like I said, they were 14 and 15 at the time. I know we have kids around the same age. And that's not an easy task to do with teenagers, especially when you've broken trust and credibility along the way. But I was really navigating what repairing in my family looked like. And I was seeing very quickly how that was changing. And at the time, you know, when I went into rehab 6 months earlier, I resigned from my job, taking my financial income to zero, and was living off what little savings I had left. And I'm, like I said, I was a sole provider of my family. And I was interviewing for jobs. Most of them were in the car industry because I was a powerhouse in that industry, and a woman in that industry that's good at what she does is a hot commodity. And I remember sitting at a job interview for this great job in that industry. And I remember stopping them partway through and saying, you know what, I am coming out of my skin sitting here, and I so apologize for wasting your time. But if I stay in this industry and continue to do this, it's just a matter of time before I go back to what I've always known. You know, muscle memory is something that's very powerful, and I have to continue to break this down. And ironically, about a week later, I was introduced to network marketing through a product. I had no desire to be in network marketing. In fact, I was like, I have just wiped out my social network. Like, on paper, I'm least likely to build a powerhouse team. But I fell in love with the product. And within a week, I was like, okay, what is in this stuff? Didn't even realize it was actually network marketing until I started Googling what this was. And that's when I realized, like, oh crap, it's one of those things. And as much as it was scaring me, I could feel, it's kind of like when you meet your soulmate, that you have that feeling like the exhale says, oh shit. The same kind of thing happened when I realized what this was. And I knew exactly what I was about to do. And even though it terrified me and scared me, and I had no idea the how, with what I was working with, there wasn't much on paper that would have made me bet on me, but I knew what was in me, and I knew why I was about to do it. And it was about to take everything I had learned over the last 6 months and 40 plus years to serve the greater good, and not use it to work against me anymore, but to help me stay accountable for myself and to live what I was always destined to do as that cute little girl. And also pay that freaking forward to all the other people and all the little boys and girls that I could see in the eyes of the people in front of me, and help them not only change the belief that maybe they learned early on, but serve others along the way. And that's why I believe that drive, that grit, that experience of that little girl really empowered what I was about to do in network marketing. And obviously we know what happened after that. You and I.
Yeah, right. I mean, again, I want to repeat it just so people hear it. You know, 7-figure income, $1 million plus income. You know, when you came in, I often feel when I listen to you, I mean, we've worked together on stage. I've listened to you in front of a room. I've interviewed you before. But I think there's a relatability to you that a lot of people feel connected to, because I think so many people walk through life with the mask and with the mask you used to wear, which was really your front, which was the chameleon, again, guarded heart, chameleon front, right? And a lot of people think that, you know, being popular or being liked is the way. Whereas, you know, I think that what I love about you, and your results speak for themselves, is, you know, your sort of rawness and your authenticity and your willingness to show yourself and the journey and not pretend or hide from it has really served you. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? You know, when you first became authentic and started to really speak truth, because that was one of the hardest things. It took me 44 years to learn how to tell the truth, because I had to lie. You know, because if you told the truth, I mean, you know, it was a violent act that was going to follow, even though you were encouraged to tell the truth. Oh, just tell the truth and you won't get in trouble. So you tell the truth, and you know, suddenly you're flying across the room with, you know, with a part of your hair missing because, you know, it's in someone else's hand, right? Talk about that. What was it like to suddenly start telling the truth and living truth?
Well, in the way that I grew up, if we were vulnerable or emotional, we got hurt.
Right.
And it was a weakness. I mean, that Irish pride, there's something about it.
It's like, hey, you want something to cry for? Do you remember that?
You want something to cry about?
Yeah.
Like I heard that and I was like, noted. And the fact that like I never could have predicted that I would be on stage in front of 20,000 people saying this is who I really am and being loved for it. Because for 40 years I hid that part of me thinking that was what made me unlovable.
Right.
And it was about a little over 8 years ago that I remember I was asked to speak to a group in a rehab center. And I was terrified to speak my truth. We call it our experience, strength, and hope. And that's how we carry the message to other people that like it's possible, like change is possible. And I remember hearing and seeing my first day in rehab, there are these things called the promises. And they're like, if you are consistent and you stay true to this and work on this every day, these are what's possible for you. And I remember looking at them and crying, like, how is that possible for a girl like me? Somebody who's so angry and broken and have hurt people and lied and all the things. And I will never, ever freaking forget when I hit one of them that says, no matter how far down the scale you have gone, you will see how your experience will benefit others. And I remembered that so clearly. I was like, okay, like this all of a sudden it made me realize this all mattered for something. All these little things, all the connecting of the dots were going to matter for something. And the very thing that I thought disqualified me for the life I'm living today are the very things that qualify me and make me relatable and offer hope for those that maybe are wearing the masks and smiling through it and have really good makeup and a tight body and the perfect whatever that you think is your success. When we strip it all down, we see we're all the same. And especially the world we're living in today, I think we need more of this now more than ever. Like we're all just human beings with a lot of hurt in our heart. And it is possible to heal it, but we have to share it and we have to be true to who we are. And that's where transformation happens.
You said something, it really made me aware of who's listening, because there's people out there who haven't, gone down or been treated like maybe you and I were very similar. Again, because Irish and British, right? So, that was just, children were seen and not heard. Beating children was a national pastime. You could beat other people's kids. If I messed up in my neighbor's yard, they could punch me. And if I went home and cried to my dad, I'd get another one. Right? And that's just the way it was. It was just a very different kind of place. Teachers were the same. My teachers, every single teacher, they used to pick you up by the ears and bang your head against the wall. It was just throw wooden erasers. You ever had that happen to you, where they throw a wooden eraser across the room and hit you in the head, right? Yeah. But, I just think about that person who doesn't have the extreme of our story, but they carry the same wounds, because it could be an emotional thing where they were embarrassed in a classroom by a teacher, and that still carries forward. And I think it's important for us to sort of just talk about that is, the amount of people we meet that have had what appear to be perfect lives, grown up in perfect homes with, yet they still carry those emotional or physical scars that they carry forward because of something. And it can be sometimes so trivial. What have you experienced? How often have you seen that where on paper someone's got the perfect life, yet they're still feeling the same way you felt 8 years ago?
Well, I know that anytime there's a perfect anything, it's a mask for something. A lot of the people that strive for that perfection image, and I'm not judging it at all, I know that they actually believe somewhere deep down inside of them that they need to be that, portray that, exude that in order to have worth. And I think there's a healthy balance there. Obviously, I have goals and all of that. But when there's like this relentless pursuit of it, and other things take a back seat to have it, I can admire the work ethic it takes to do that, but I also see the pain behind it. And, I tell people a lot of time, like, especially when you hear a story like yours or mine, where there is some really deep stuff, I recognize so often that people minimize their pain. And they're like, well, I didn't have it as bad as XYZ. So I need to, like, there's something wrong with me that I'm still in pain. And like I said, I've experienced physical, sexual trauma, and none of that holds a candle to that one sentence I heard about when I was born.
Yeah.
That is single-handedly the most defining moment of my life.
Yeah.
And so I don't want anybody to minimize. If you are in pain, it is valid. There is a reason for it. And start unpacking it. Don't minimize it. There is a reason why it keeps coming up for you. And I want you to also know if it's coming up, you're fully equipped and capable to handle it. You don't have to stuff it anymore. You don't have to drink it. You don't have to Netflix it. You don't have to do anything to not feel it. It's coming to the surface for you to heal so you can do what you're meant to do in this world and spread your love and light and gifts and have it matter for something. Have it freaking matter. Like David and I went through what we went through so that we could be who we are today for the world. No question about it. And it's not like,
Would you go back and change it? You wouldn't, would you?
not for a second.
I
And
would.
my kids, like when I hear them tell the truth of our story, not easy to hear about myself, but I know that it's their truth from their perspective, and it's helping thousands of children and millennials move forward so they don't have to repeat what I did. Like, are you kidding me? Like, tell away, speak the truth. The truth does set you free. So just be willing to let the world, or, your safe, close few, start with a safe, close few that have your best interest at heart. And
I was going to talk about that because I think one of the things that I was fortunate about, and you were fortunate stepping into network marketing, I stepped into traveling. So I left England kind of accidentally. So I left my environment quite accidentally. And I was going for 6 days and I've never gone back.
Right.
And so, but the fact that I backpacked for 10 and a half years, that was the importance of environment. So some of you are hurting. If you've been in the habit of playing a certain game to survive, there's very possible the people around you are playing the same game, right? So you may find, like you may find that you're going to have to sort of step into some new relationships to find that, or you're going to be a catalyst of change for friends because they're going to see your courage. And once you start telling the truth, other friends, but if you get judged by someone, once you start speaking your truth, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this because you went through this, but once you stood up and then you got sort of attacked for standing up and being truthful for the first time, well, how did you navigate that? What advice would you give someone who's, in an environment and suddenly, that there is actually a tiny step forward, and then, you realize it ain't working with these people, I'm being judged again, and then suddenly all the way back, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's easy at all, because it's not. My friends were the first ones to go, and most of my family's still back east. And they were okay with me for a while. Over the last 4 years, I've really used my voice even more so, not just for network marketing purposes, but for healing purposes for whoever I'm in front of. And the last 3 years specifically, my family, almost all of them, have really attacked me. I've been outed. It's not easy, but when I look in the faces of my children, and I realize that I carry a legacy that is super important for me. I know the crap stopped with me, and there is absolutely no opinion of anybody other than mine and the big guy upstairs, the divine source, God, whatever you choose to call it. It's between me and that, and what future generations are going to carry. And at the end of the day, if I have to let people go, I will. If it means me on an island by myself, which it was when I started network marketing, it was me and my 2 kids, and that was it. And it's painful. I'm human. Does it hurt to be rejected? Does it hurt to have your family say you're no longer a part? Absolutely. It's painful. And I'm okay. I'm okay because I know if I keep certain people, places, and things in my life, I don't have room for what is meant for me. And whether it's people, whether it's love, whether it's whatever it is, abundance and money and success and service and contribution. Like, if you have clutter in your life in the form of people, places, and things, you will not have the abundance that you desire, that you put on your freaking vision board, that you talk about on podcasts. Like, you won't. And so at all costs, I was willing to let go of whatever didn't serve the greatest good and the mission that I know God put on my life. And it's painful. And I've been doing, especially the last year, my one protector of my whole life. I have had one my entire life, who is my uncle, and he passed away a year ago. And since then, like, the grieving and really like like stepping into who I am has gone next level, because now it's like, it's me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's me. I'm not going to minimize the pain that it comes with having hard conversations or no conversations. There's a lot to be said in no conversation.
Yeah.
And I say a lot less these days, and that speaks volumes.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating thing. So, when I want to sort of talk about this environment now, because, when we look at what's happening in our world, people often ask me, Dave, you could work on any stage in the world. You've seen me work on stage, and, there's not an environment in that arena of training or teaching that I'm not comfortable with. But I look at it's not a judgment, but I look at a lot of trainers, and I can see that they're training things that they don't live, or they don't believe, or it's something they've read or they've learned, but they haven't lived yet. And there's a difference. There's a congruency sort of misstep. But there's a lot, like today, everyone's a personal development guru. They're everywhere now, right? They pop up every 4 minutes, right? But this environment, there are people often ask me, why do you do events for network marketing where, people are paying $190 when you used to get paid $10,000 for an event? And I was training tens of thousands of people and making a fortune. But there's this, well, again, in the right hands, the right company, because I've seen some dodgy companies and some bad companies, and that just comes down to the owners and the management, right? But this environment is one that I personally feel committed to, and there's nothing better. I love going into a room where there's 400 or 500 new network marketers you can feel their fear, their legs are crossed, their arms are crossed, their minds are crossed, and to me, because I know the impact that any one of them can have, and how, like you think of how many people are in your global team right now?
Just under 100,000.
So you've 100,000, just under 100,000, and that explains why you're earning so much money. But how many conversations do you think you've had?
Thousands.
So thousands, right? Thousands. But how many people said yes to you?
About 250.
So look at that. So people hear these numbers, 250 from 250 people, you end up with just under 100,000 people in your team that you're impacting. And not only this team, but you're actually impacting, you get cross-line or whatever. But what is it about this profession? Why are we in love with it? why especially like you and I mean, again, the similarity of our story, but we both found the same thing in the same profession. And there's magical, it's hard to articulate, right?
I get asked a lot too, because I do get paid to speak in things that aren't network marketing and all of that. And there's a lot of people listening, maybe even now, are like, I didn't even know you were in network marketing, right? And it's one of those things where I think that it's the greatest training wheels, personal development, where you get paid to do it at the same time program that there is. The great news is everybody can do it. The bad news is everybody can do it. So you kind of have to really be able to spot it. And that's where I think you and I, because of our background, we know when we have a star in front of us, even if they don't know it. You and I both have this ability to see magic in people. And why I love is specifically the event that you do, that is so powerful, is they come in hungry and eager, and they're willing. How we do this: honest, open, and willing. How? HOW, honest, open, willing. And what I love about network marketing, it offers hope for anyone. It doesn't discriminate. I mean, look at me. On paper, I was least likely to do this. And most people would have bet against me. In fact, I had people saying, you probably should get a real job. Only somebody special really makes that work. That's what I was told. And I will never stop giving back to that community. I will never stop doing network marketing, because it is a great way for people to really not just learn, but integrate these tools into not just their business, but their families, which is what, it's a ripple effect. Yeah. It's a ripple effect. And I love what's possible with it if you're willing to lean in and really do the work and you're coachable. Not everybody is. Only about really 2% will really do it. Really do it. And I know those numbers, and it's hard, but if you stay in it and you're willing, like I was, I mean, anything's possible. And I love it.
And the 2%, I just want to jump in. It is the benefit for the others, if they're not willing to be fully coached and go all the way, is they still get to be a part of something, or the products, or they get to be a part of the community or the culture. Even if they're not succeeding at the highest level, they could have a small part-time income, which I love, and the majority of people will be part-time. But primarily, if they, in fact, if you could step into someone's brain listening right now and they're saying, all right, Tracy, I'm going to be coachable. I'm going to do whatever you tell me. What would you tell them? Like, if they're just stepping in, they're just saying yes to network marketing, and let's say they're on your team, and they want to demonstrate the 2%. What advice would you give them to start? Where would you start them?
Well, first of all, I would really encourage them to have a level of self-awareness that is unmatched. Before you can really effectively take people next level, you have to be able to lead yourself, right? I mean, it doesn't mean you can't lead people, but you're only going to be able to lead people where you've gone, quite honestly, next level. And so that was one of the things that, there was nobody that was going to outwork me in that regard. And because I knew where I was headed and I wanted everybody to do that. So I needed to stay at least one step ahead of all of them. So you got to be willing to do what you're going to tell other people to do. You got to walk your talk first and foremost. And if you're not willing to do that, then be okay with where you're going to be, right? You got to be you got to know that you're only going to go as far as you have walked. You can't expect to find a powerhouse like me and take your stuff next level. It's just not, you might, but it's very, very rare. Be humble to know that you don't know it all. Also realize that not everybody thinks and talks like you. And so mastering yourself and understanding not just who you are, but how your energy has an effect on people is really, really important. I am naturally a very intense person, naturally. And that doesn't always work well when you're with a bunch of women or a bunch of empaths and sensitive people. So being aware of who is in my presence was also really important so I could speak to them. Not everybody is motivated by the same thing as you. And so understanding and really listening to people. What is in it for them? With them. What is in it for them? Not what's in it for me. What's in it for them? When you can speak that into every human being, you will automatically get what you want. Trust me. And then some. The gifts that will come to you is just immeasurable. Because when I think back to specifically my first 6 months in network marketing, I mean, I didn't know how I was going to keep a roof over my head. I really, really didn't. And if you had been a fly on the wall to every conversation I had in those first 6 months, everything was about them and their success, whether it was a health journey or a financial journey. Everything was in it for them. And a year later, when I was plopped on a stage telling my story, I will never forget the messages and the conversations I had with those very first people that joined me. And they said to me with a choke, they were choked up, and they said, I had no idea what you were going through during that time. Everything that you said was for me. And you just poured so much love and belief into me. And I had no idea you were going through that at the time. And you can see how I was so ridiculously blessed and taken care of financially. Obviously that came, but more important, my heart filled up and it allowed me to continue that message. But you really have to come from a place of love, service, and heart for helping other people. Honestly, you will get what you want.
And sorry interrupting, but to love in the way that we can love, right? And I'm not saying it's different from other people, but going through the roads and learning how to love ourselves and fall back in love. Because when you're walking through life, which a lot of people are, I mean, the number one thing I see, I've trained over 1 million students around the world, and self-worth, self-love is the number one. The root, if I go to any root of whatever's going on in someone's life, is going to come down to how they see themselves in the mirror. And I think that's why neither one of us would go back and wish it was different. I mean, again, you talk about sexual abuse, the same thing with me, right? But I wouldn't want to go back and change any of that, because it's allowed me to have that empathy. But now it doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if I took you with me on a journey to a country where we didn't even speak the language, we'd still be able to communicate, and people would still feel loved because of a capacity of having this cup that's so full, And again, I'm sure you have your moments, right?
Oh, I still got it in me. Let me tell you, that little fireball still there.
She's entering menopause. No, I'm just kidding.
Not yet.
Just wait. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. It's, but I just want to get back to that idea of how simple this is to love and to put our attention into other people's lives. And I think that, my life is like yours. I'm so fortunate, but then I love a lot. So I look at the reciprocity that I wasn't looking for. I don't wake up in the morning and, well, if I love more today, I'm going to make more money. It's not that. It just is there. It's just whoever it is. It's like my builders. I'm doing a renovation right now at the house because I'm at COVID. I'm always like, well, what should we do? So I make the most of it, right? But, these bunch of builders here, we went golfing and it was raining. And we were like, yeah, let's just go golfing in the rain. But the fact that these guys are builders in my house, but to connect with them really. And I notice when I'm in the garage, because I'm doing the man cave, I'm dropping the F-bomb a lot, not that they're all beautiful guys, but it's just the ability to get in and feel completely at home in any environment, whether I was going there or I was going into the white, oh, no, I shouldn't say that, but going into, into somewhere else, right? But so talk about that again, the learning to love, just because, I know we're going to get very close to the end of this show, and we are going to do another show, and I'm going to talk to you about how to talk to anyone, because that's one of your gifts. And so we're going to actually put a little link right here, right there, and we're going to link you for the how to talk to anyone. So, and I know that people are really going to resonate with this, but just talk about this, how to love, because I think it's really very, very challenging for most people.
Well, do you want to know why it's challenging? I think this thing of self-care and self-love, there are buzzwords going around, like you have to love yourself in order to love other people. And I think there's a problem in that, because and this was a huge eye opener for me, because when I looked at what being cared for looked like, it meant neglect and abandonment. And so if I'm self-caring, that means I'm self-abandoning and self-neglecting. And when it came to love, I thought my version of love, what it meant to be loved, was to be whatever those people wanted me to be. And so I had to remove self-love and self-care out of it for a while until I could build a new belief around what those words actually meant. And so I use the word honor, self-honoring, because there's no discrepancy in what the word honor means. There's no discrepancy.
One of my favorite words, by the way.
It is my favorite word. And
are you sure we're not brother and sister?
I know. I swear we are. And like, I don't use any filter. I'll drop the F-bomb. I don't care. That's who I am. And then it can be equally as sweet and on all those things. But I think there's such a gift in being able to show up honoring who we are to our core. And I got a smart mouth, and I have a sensitive heart, and I love God, and I love children and puppies and all those things. But all of it is honoring to who I am. And I'm going to honor the journey I've been on. I'm going to honor my parents, who did the very best they could. They screwed up a lot, because that's what they knew. It doesn't make them bad people. I've screwed up a hell of a lot, and I'm going to honor every step of the journey. But you really can't have compassion and care for other people if you aren't first honoring you and your journey. Truly. Like, we can mask it and say, yes, I have so much self-love and self-care, but you know what? That insecurity, that self-criticism, that does ooze out of you, and you will never attract somebody like me as long as you don't have that. And I don't mean that to judge you. I don't, but you are going to attract what you exude, for sure. And the reason I know today that I have nothing but great, honorable people in my life is because that is what comes out of my pores every single day. It's non-negotiable. It is really hard. And David, I've had to flex a different muscle lately when it comes to love. I had, I didn't date for a long, long time, and I've just kind of ventured into that. And that is making me test all of my stuff next level.
Yeah, I've got it on paper, but now
I'm very tactical and understand it, but to actually have to put into play with the most vulnerable parts of me, I understand, for those of you listening, how hard it is. But you honor the journey and trust that everything will go as it's supposed to. And even if it doesn't go as you think it should, you're going to learn a heck of a lot about yourself along the way, which will help you help the greatest good. But you have to honor. Use the word honor, not love or care.
I love it. I love
Because
it.
depending on where you came from, like if you're talking me and David, we know what care meant as kids. It wasn't so great. We know
Yeah.
what we thought love was as kids. It wasn't so great for us. So honor, look up the word honor. And that's the operation on which you should
Yeah,
look.
it's so interesting because, again, I said I would say it is my favorite word. If I had to choose what I want to be when I grow up, is I want to be honorable. And I look for that I do a lot of coaching of men, and that's what comes up early. Let's talk about honor. What does that mean to you? Because everyone has a definition, right? It really is kind of, maybe we should do a 3-hour show. Joe Rogan does. I don't know, it's the number one podcast in the world. Why the hell do we need to do a short one, right? For people's attention spans, this is just too good. But just as we sort of close this one out, we'll get into another sort of show topic. But what's something you want to leave? You can see where we've gone with this entire show, but what's a final kind of thought, or what's something you want to leave people with as we sort of close this one out?
Because
By the way, has this been so much fun just to chat?
I always love, I said something last week about when you and I chat, I never know what the hell we're going to talk about, but it's always gold. And anytime we have had a conversation or an interview, it goes viral because it is so good and because it is so real. And I think that's why people are drawn to you and I. We do captivate a room because of the realness. And, back in the day, both of us used to use that as a manipulation and as a measuring stick for our worthiness. But I know that people feel the genuine care and compassion we have for humankind when you and I speak. And for those of you listening, what I want to leave on your heart is like, do your work. Be willing to crack yourself open a little bit and let the world see you, because you become more relatable and you build credibility and trust with anybody you come in contact with, whether they join your network marketing business or not. The world needs more of that. And I know that you will be rewarded in ways you cannot even imagine, whether it's through the legacy you leave with your families, with the love you attract in your life, with the amount of money in your bank account, your personal health, whatever that is. Be willing to let people see you for who you are, and the rest will honestly fall into place. And it gets a lot easier. I know if I had tried network marketing a year before I did, it would have been a shit show. It really, really would have, because there was masks here, masks there. And what mask do I need to wear for this? Like, forget it. Like Tracy showing up as Tracy made this really freaking easy. Yeah. It really did. And it didn't mean I didn't work hard. I worked my ass off. But as far as the human aspect of it, a piece of cake, because I showed up honoring me and my journey every step of the way.
Yeah. And, we all love mess. I think the most relatable part of a human being is the messy bits, right? Very few people relate to, success or, nice car. But when we hear a story like yours and, again, yours, it's just the relatability factor. That's why I truly believe that many of your superpowers, you have a lot, but that relatable part of you, that authentic part, and that willingness to be the sort of the fuck you and the puppy lover, there's that kind of, that range that you live in, because it is a range. And I think that's what a whole person is. They have both ends and the middle, and they all connect, right? And so anyway, I don't even want to stop, but I'm going to have to stop. I don't have to stop. I'm choosing to stop. And we'll, don't forget, this show's called My Extra Mile. It's about those small things, those incremental steps, and Tracy's giving you some real gold here. And the idea of just starting, taking that step into sort of cracking yourself more open, regardless of where you're at in life. If there's anything that, that you're carrying, that you don't have to carry it. I always say that when you're carrying dark energies, it's like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die, right? But just think that 1% rule, attempt to do, to become 1% more each day, and watch what happens. It's so magical. It doesn't have to be all at once. It doesn't have to be radical change. Tracy talked about, starting sort of working on herself 14 years before, and then, right? And then sort of, flip-flopping around, and then 8 years really jumping in. So we'll see you on the other side. Please subscribe. Please share this with friends. And this is a great conversation to truly share. And we'll definitely see you on the other side.